Hey everybody, welcome back to another Q&A on April 21st, 2025. First one, I know you love prebiotics better, but still, what probiotics do you find helpful and in what situations? So I should preface that by saying the reason I may say that I like prebiotics better is just because with prebiotics, they are facilitating the growth of the good microbes or the good bugs, right? It's not that probiotics are useless. It's just that when you intake probiotics, you have to, A, hope the bacteria is still intact. It's not dead. You have to probably be targeting something specific just because the product's going to have one strand or 5 strands or maybe 10 strands of different bacteria. It could have quite a few. And there are a lot more than 10 strands of different bacteria in the GI tract. If you don't know what you're trying to accomplish with the probiotic itself, it may do nothing. It may make you feel worse. And if you're really lucky, maybe it makes you feel better. But you kind of have to know what you're going for there. And the other issue as well is that without sufficient amount of prebiotics, once you remove the probiotic, you're not feeding that anymore. Or you weren't feeding it in the first place. I said you're not replacing it anymore. You're not intaking it. So the effects aren't going to be as long lasting, and you could potentially create some level of dysbiosis with that. When I say dysbiosis, you're just intaking these specific strands in really high dosages and nothing else. And if you don't have sufficient prebiotics in there to feed the other good stuff, you're only really increasing those few specific strands. Whereas with the prebiotic, it's feeding all the good stuff. Again, not useless, but should provide some context. I mean, there are some probiotics that could be helpful. I'll name a couple situations that are a little bit more common. So like for BV or recurring infections like that, bacillus strands, potentially something like the Femdophilus products. If you're seeing recurring infections like that, a lot of people use like a Saccharomyces boulardii, because it's a pretty resistant, hardy strand that's more resistant to antimicrobials and antibiotics. So they might use that during antimicrobial use, like a SIBO protocol or something. Probably is going to help provide some additional defense against infectious pathogens and pathogenic bacteria. So that could be a potential situation. Rituri strand, I believe that's Rituri, I think that's how you pronounce that. H. pylori, that's one that I might drop in sometimes. So there's about 3 common situations that you might use a probiotic in. The question that people ask a lot is, do you use probiotics like post SIBO protocol or post antibiotics? Sometimes. It really depends on how depleted I think the bacteria is if we're not retesting it. Did we use a low FODMAP diet? Did we not? A lot of the time I don't. So if we didn't, and we had sufficient prebiotics in there to feed the good stuff, we might be all right. What did the commensal bacteria look like prior to starting? If it wasn't that good, probably not that much better after you take antimicrobials or antibiotics. So maybe that would be a situation where you would use them. Something like a Visbiome or a really high dose multi-strand probiotic. In that case, you're getting into some high dollar stuff there. But that's a handful of situations where you could use them. I would not recommend arbitrarily tossing probiotics at anything. It's just not it's not a good idea. Best case scenario, you're probably just wasting your money. If you do know what you're doing and you know what strands to use, then there is some utility there. Now, this is an interesting question. I like this. Better to build for genetics or preference when it comes to picking a category to compete in? It's a great question. There's a enjoyment factor in all this, hopefully. So hopefully the category that you are genetically inclined to fit into is also the one that you enjoy. That would be convenient. Now, I know that's not always the case. So we can meet in the middle in some instances, right? Maybe you are genetically fit for, we'll say bikini, but you do have the patience, the time, at least good enough genetics that you can build up to wellness, which is a lot more muscular. There's probably there is a lot of structural similarities between the classes, so you could probably do that. There's people that have done it. There's people that are doing it. If it's like, man, I can barely have enough muscle to be a bikini competitor, wellness just is not in the cards for you there. Not if you want to do any good. I think that enjoyment matters, or preference, I guess, matters, but in my opinion, if you just want to jump into a category just because you like to do the poses, but you're so far off genetically from what that category represents, you're probably not going to do well. And I mean, I guess if you're okay with that, then that's your choice. But if you're going to compete and pay money and do all these other things, I think in an ideal world, you would gravitate towards what's going to give you the best outcome. Good question though. Can you please go over Thymosin alpha 1 benefits and considerations? So Thymosin alpha 1 is a kind of an interesting peptide. It's we'll call it a immune modulating peptide, I guess would be a good word for it, used in situations with immunodeficiency. So it's not one that I'm using that often. Maybe on occasion it'll get used if somebody really low immune function, really low white blood cells, something like that, we might use it. It is a peptide derived from the thymus gland, I believe. If you're familiar with the thymus gland, then you'll know that it has immune modulating effects, right? So it'll help produce T cells, hence the name. It's a pretty strong immune modulating peptide. So when you think of peptides, a lot of the peptides that we use or that we have or that we research are things that the body makes already. We have this thing, it has this action, we can just take extra of it to have additional action. That's the theory in a lot of these cases. Does it work? And that's a good question to ask. It seems like the research is favorable. There is some. I don't know if there's much on humans or if any, or if it's just animal models that they've used. I'm not sure on that. Yeah, it seems to be a relatively effective peptide in the sea of endless peptides that most of which don't do anything. Cool one to check out if you are having immunodeficiency type of issues. It's a very interesting one to look into. A go-to strategy to help with a flare with Crohn's colitis, helping with a Crohn's or colitis flare. So some recommendations. Person dependent, of course, like anything else. Biggest thing with autoimmune situations like this is, what's the flare coming from? What is the trigger? If you can't figure that out, or if you have not even the slightest idea as to what might be the driver, you're going to have a hard time with these types of situations. So drivers can be cumulative even. So they can be like a cumulative stress thing where it's not just one thing, an acute stressor. It's something that's accumulating over time. That gets harder to find, right? That gets harder to see, I guess, or quantify. So you should be able to hopefully notice some signs that that's happening before you go into a full-blown flare. Does that mean you're going to be able to do that every time? Probably not, unfortunately. But in an ideal world, that's what you would do. If you are in a flare, we have a few systems, or a few things we really want to look at there. Immune system, overall inflammation, stress for sure, maybe nutrition in some cases. Some people may want to try like a low residue diet. You can look that up. A little bit easier on the bowels. That might be helpful during a flare. Might not even be necessary outside of a flare. Really, again, just kind of depends on the person. During the flare, from a supplementation standpoint, things, all kinds of different anti-inflammatory options, and I've done that many different ways and found success different ways. Some of it also depends on where the person's from. Are they in the US? Are they out of the US? I do a lot of these cases for people that are out of the US too, so they don't always have the same access to everything. But in short, things like good high dose of bioavailable curcumin, boswellia, PEA, maybe some colostrum, potentially some fringe area, like fringe area things if you want to go into that realm if the flare is pretty bad, like oral BPC, the arginate salt, TB500 can help, GHK copper peptide, lorazepatide. You guys can look up Level Up brand, LVL. Look up their Ultimate GI Repair. That's a pretty good one. I mean, those are the main things, right? Those are the main things to help with the actual flare. It's just going to maybe require higher dosages, and we have to drastically pull back on stress load. That is huge. I cannot stress that enough. You're probably not going to have great success getting rid of a flare if you are insanely stressed out. Your immune system is not going to regulate itself very well. So just keep that in mind. No bleed for 1 year, leaky gut, H. pylori, did protocol for 90 days, 10 months healing journey, still having gut dysbiosis. That's all that it says. So I'm not sure what the question is there. That sounds like probably something to do like a consult for. I would be happy to help with a consultation with that one. That sounds like you've got a lot going on. Go ahead and reach out if you'd like. I wouldn't be able to provide a whole lot on that right here just because it's so, it's pretty broad and I don't have any context. But otherwise, that is it. That is all for today. So talk to you guys next time.